Good afternoon. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Trailblazing TV. It is a glorious afternoon, and I'm really excited to be here with you. We had a really fun show episode earlier this morning, and so today, this afternoon, I'm bringing you something that I think is going to be pretty cool. I'm really looking forward to sharing. So we're going to just wait a moment and see who comes online with us. Hey, Joe. Good afternoon. How are you doing? How you doing? See if I can invite some people here. All right. Hey, Joe, just I really appreciate you taking some time with me. Hey, Chris, welcome back. Welcome back. Joe, I'm curious, where are you located at today? Like, where are you hanging from? I kind of talked about this morning, so I'm genuinely interested to find out a little bit more about where you're tuning in from. I'm going to give just a moment here while we wait for a few other people to come online, and then I'm going to talk about our topic today, which is going to be, I hope it's a blessing to you, because I'm pretty excited about sharing. Chris, thanks for being with us here. Okay, so for those of you that are tuning in, I'm Deborah Sweet. This is Trailblazing TV, and we had a really innovative episode this morning. So what we're going to talk about this afternoon is something called riding the ridgeline. And so what is riding the ridgeline? This morning I was talking a little bit more about the subject matter of when to lean in and when to pivot. And so just to kind of preface, for those of you who might be watching for the first time and joining in, you know, I fell in love with motorcycles when I was pretty young. I was about 8 years old, and my mom's cousin's son picked me up, set me on his motorcycle, and I knew in that moment that that was just the coolest thing ever, and it was something that I wanted to do. Hi, Julie. Hey, Blaine. Thanks for joining in. And so, you know, growing up, I had to use my imagination a lot, because I grew up in the time where a lot of girls didn't ride motorcycles. Now today, more women are riding motorcycles. Hey, Marlon, welcome back. But even with that, oh, hey, Tally, thanks for being here. So riding motorcycles was, you know, something that I knew a long time ago I really wanted to do. But, you know, I grew up in an era where girls, you just didn't do stuff like that. However, that was one of those private things, those passions that I always imagined. And so I had the sky blue banana seat with the, I forget, what did they call the bar? That very tall bar on the back. There's like a support bar on the back of your bike with the handlebars that are up there and the little basket and everything. So I ride my bicycle. I've been on bicycles a long time. I loved roller skating, so I like this wheels in motion thing. But I would ride around one of the neighborhoods, and I remember being on my bicycle. Hey, Stacy. I remember being on my bicycle pretending sometimes that it was a motorcycle. And then I also remember pretending it was a car. You know, back in the day, this is where you would go to a gas station and you weren't allowed to fill up your car. Now, mind you, I was a kid. I was probably like 10. No, I must have been younger than that, about 76, about maybe 8, 9. So, but I remember started to pay attention to the news, hearing about gas prices, but I always remember that you'd pull up to the gas tank, the full service gas pump, fill her up with regular, please, right? So my bike, what am I talking about? So my bicycle was definitely, it was freedom. It was part of freedom to me, right? Get out, and my mom allowed me to ride my bike through the hills of the neighborhood, and oh, I loved it. The feeling of the wind in your hair. I remember growing up, my mom, when skateboards started to become more popular, we had this little blue plastic skateboard. Now, me and skateboards never really clicked, and I think it was more the board, and I didn't have a good place to play. But so my bicycle was the thing, and I would pretend it was a motorcycle. I'd pretend it was a car. I would just enjoy riding a bike and just that feeling of freedom. So quick question for those of you who come on. Hi, Julie. Let me see by some thumbs up here. How many of you, did you ride a bike as a kid? Do you still ride a bike? Is that something that you all are doing? If you could chat in on it, or give me a thumbs up for a second, because I'm going to tie this all into what I want to teach today about riding the ridgeline. Give y'all just a moment. So my bicycle, my fascination with wheels and bicycles went from not only just being a kid pretending it was a motorcycle, a bicycle, a car, but then as I got into high school, I upgraded. I had a Schwinn, I think, or did I have a Huffy? I don't remember, but those were the big bikes back in the day. All I know is that I had a 3-speed when all my friends had a 10-speed. And I didn't have the cool handlebar bike. I had the more stable bike. That's okay. I rode that bike everywhere. And as for quite some time again, it still was my freedom, right? There's just this connection when you are so focused on something. And a bicycle, riding a bike requires skills. There's skills we learn growing up that transfer throughout adulthood. And then eventually I got to the point where, hey, Debbie, welcome back. Hey, Leon. Eventually I got to the point where I did get my bike. In fact, I had my boyfriend at the time got me a bike that was great. It was a wonderful bike. It was a really nice gift. It was a 12-speed. Now back then, that was like the best you could get. It was a touring bike, lightweight, and I rode that bike all the time. So what am I talking about, and why are we talking about bikes and this concept of riding the ridgeline? So I want you to imagine you riding a bike, if that's what you do. Eventually, let me set this up one more level. So although I owned a bicycle, I always had guy friends that they rode motorcycles, dirt bikes. And I remember my fascination with dirt bikes and street bikes was pretty intense for a young girl. And there were more dirt bikes, and my neighbor, the guys in the neighborhood, they rode, they raced, and even though I couldn't always see the motorcycles, I could tell by the sound of the engine. I got to know by the sound of the engine who was riding, what they were riding, how long they were riding. And so I was really thrilled that, growing up, I had a couple of friends, male friends, that tried to teach me how to ride street bikes. And it was never the right bike at the right time in the right place. When I moved to California, I eventually met my husband. And he's been riding motorcycles since he was little, and bless his heart, he was so awesome. He taught me how to ride motorcycles. He bought me my first bike, and so we've been riding ever since. Now, this concept of riding the ridgeline, I want you to imagine, you might have seen some really crazy videos. There's a lot of videos on nowadays, but imagine going up really big mountains, and you get up, so you've got a peak, right? You've got a peak like this, and in the middle is just a really small track, okay? So that's the visual I'd like to have you hold on to. Whether you're thinking of motorcycle riding that you've seen videos of, or maybe you've done it, or if you've seen hiking, if you look up the mountains, there are people that have hiked and trekked and mountained and, ridden, and there's these paths that are there. Some paths are paved and very obvious, and other paths you have to cut the way through, right? If you're climbing up a mountain and you're going off the beaten path, you're going to make your own trail. But eventually, when you're up to this mountaintop, or a high hill, or a bluff, whatever you want to call it, you get to the top, and in many cases, there is what's called a ridge line. So even at the roof of your house, right? For peaked houses, there's something that literally is called the roof, the ridge line. That's where the pointy part comes together. So what this visual I'm trying to map out for you here is going to be an analogy. I want you to have a visual for the analogy of what I'm going to teach you. So when a motorcycle rider goes up and they're dirt biking, right? Now, because of the injury that I've had, my brain injury, there are times where we didn't know it, because we didn't know for a long time that I had this brain injury. So I'd go up these hills, and going up the hill really wasn't an issue. Like, I don't have an issue going up the hill, right? Because you can see where you're going. There's usually a pretty decent path. Sometimes the path is pretty vertical. And my husband taught me your first time around, when you're going up a hill on a motorcycle and then you're going to go down, right? Sometimes you want to ride around the bottom to see if you can, to get a lay of the land, right? Check the terrain around you and kind of look around so you can scope out what you're going to be riding over. Now, that's sage wisdom. So how does that apply when you're building a business or when you're making changes in your life, right? If you have the time and you can do a safe strategy to check out the terrain around you first before you go up and over something complicated, that's great, because you have perspective. It's about setting up expectations. But there are times when you're out in the desert and you're just clipping, and maybe you're riding with a group of people and you're just all going together. You don't always have the time. You can't always break from the pack. You just have to go do, right? But even when you go do, if you're going up a wide path, there's this point that you get up to the top. Now, some mountains you get up and you've got to go right back down. But if you can control the speed going up, and that there's a little skill you have to learn when you're going up that hill for the first time, especially if it's an up downhill versus an up and a flat path, like where there's a long path at the top where there is a ridgeline to ride. There's two sides I need to teach you. So there's the up downhill where it's quick, fast, and you're going like over a bump at the top of the mountain. And when I talk about the ridgeline, that means you're cresting the mountain, and at the top of the mountain, there's a path that you're going to ride on for a while at the top that's very narrow. So for me, when I was, before we understood that I had this brain injury, what would happen is I would accelerate or I would go up the mountain. And this morning I talked about when to lean in and when to pivot. So it's kind of an interesting thing. When you're going up a mountain like that on a motorcycle, you got to lean in. You got to lean forward on the bike. It's adjusting your center of balance so that the body sitting forward on the motorcycle increases the momentum so that you can get up to the top of the hill without stalling out. But then you got to get up to the top, and the safe thing to do is to stop at the top of the hill, catch your breath, and then you want to pick your track going down. That's the motorcycle word, right? Pick your line, choose your line. What that so for non-motorcycle runners, what that means is you're going to take a look at what does the ground look like. Is it soft here? Is it rocky here? Is it pivety divity here? Is there brush? Do you have a clear pathway, right? For people that hike, it's the same thing. What's the trail? Is there a trail, and what does that trail look like, and what's the most stable, safe way to go? So the best thing to do when you're traversing these hills is get up, take a breath, assess the terrain, pick your line, and then go down. For some people, really advanced riders, it takes them just a hair split second. For me, what would happen prior to my rehab is I would ride up and it would just affect my head. Like literally, I'd get really dizzy. Now I know it's because I had this brain injury that I was riding with that we didn't know about, and my brain was trying to acclimate to the change of the what's it called? The change of the level. Sorry, it's a brain moment. The height difference. Sorry, you can work with that one, right? So I went from low to high, and that change right there is my brain was trying to acclimate to that adjustment of the height of where I was, and then I had to kind of get that scope of the my surroundings. So it was affecting my center of balance, and so I had to really balance myself before I could go down. So with some of the work that I've done through rehab, I've actually used riding my motorcycle in controlled conditions, okay? Controlled conditions where, because the motorcycle puts so much stimulation still into my body and my brain is still learning how to absorb all the input. So keep that in mind. That's something that even for non-injured brains, your brain is always looking at absorbing all of the information, right? It's got to process it when you're doing something for growth. So when you're talking about, so let me fast forward because I want to get back to the concept of riding the ridgeline. So now that my brain's been rewired, I can handle this up down, but there are times where when I know that I'm going to go to a higher level of elevation, that's the word that wasn't coming out. I changed the elevation. So now I'm going to a higher level of elevation and going into something where there's a quick up and a quick down. Sometimes in your growth steps, right, professionally and personally, you have to do it in baby steps. In basketball, I remember doing basketball, what do they call them, wind sprints? Or suicides, right? You're going to do suicides. You don't run the court all the way all the time. You're going to do it in sections. Come back, do a little bit, come back, do a little bit, come back, do a little bit, come back. So sometimes when you are getting ready to ride the ridgeline, you might have to do certain elements of growth that are in segments. And what you're doing is you're training your muscles, you're training your awareness, you're training your ability to adapt to the terrain and to the condition, so that when you formally go implement, you're going to have better success. Okay, so there's some keys to, there's a lot of wisdom in what I just shared, but let me get back to the ridgeline concept. So I want to say hello to Linda again, and Soila, thanks for joining us. So riding the ridgeline, and why this is important for me to share with you, is that you're doing something right now professionally or personally, whether you own a business, you work at a business, you're running the family through the household, you're stepping into something that's of purpose, of value, you've got passion, there's things that you want to do. You're going to have these moments where these hills are going to come up, right? They could be little hills, they could be big hills. And sometimes the little hills we get to practice. That's like controlled growth. You can do things in baby steps, right? So it's kind of like that, the basketball analogy, go forward, come back, go forward, come back. In motorcycles, off-road riding, there's something we call the whoops. The whoops go like, it's like this. And there are some days where we'll ride on some things, and you're up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And my Fitbit is counted when I'm doing these up, downs. It's like doing 1,000 squats in a day. It's crazy, right? So you're practicing this up, down, up, down, up, down. Not too tall, not too high. The risk is kind of low, so that when you go to the next taller hill that you want to either go jump, or you want to go up and down, or you want to go do a loop-de-loop on it, that you're better prepared. And then there comes this time where it's time to go ride the ridgeline. Okay, so what is this? Riding the ridgeline in motorcycles, it's what I've shared. There are these mountain tops that when you go up, they're not just a straight down. You go up, and then somebody somewhere, or it could be you're cutting through a path. You're riding on a path, but it's a very narrow path. Sometimes it's only a wheel wide. So motorcycle tires are not very wide at all, right? They're about that wide for dirt bikes. And so there are times, and all you have to do is just search it on YouTube if you want, because these guys like to video themselves. You'll see these skinny tires, and the path underneath is maybe this long. And we've seen, many of us have seen those videos where there's really crazy people, where there's this wall of dirt right here. There's this path, and then there's an 8,000-foot drop, right? That's crazy. So what do you do if you get yourself in a situation like that, right? So there are some motorcycle riders that, and hikers, right? They'll go do this on purpose, because there's a thrill. There's a thrill in the challenge. It's testing ourselves. It's putting ourselves out to a whole nother level. And that's great. And that's not for everybody. But to get to that point where when you choose to take on that kind of risk in professionally running a business, professionally working for a business, or in your own personal life, say there's a thought you've always wanted to do, but it's out of your comfort zone, sometimes you just have to go for it, right? And you want to gain the skills. So when those guys and girls are riding on those 8,000 feet up mountains, skinny trail, they're riding a ridgeline with the wall right here, there's a lot of skill that comes into, they've done a lot of the baby stepping along the way. They've done the leg work to build the muscles in the mind, to control the thinking, so that they can stay very focused on where they want to go instead of where they could end up. I'm going to pause on that, because that's a huge, huge piece of wisdom. So let me say that again, and give me a thumbs up if you're tracking with me right here. So when you get to the point where you choose to take on a risk, or sometimes you show up and you get yourself in a situation where it's the unexpected. Uh-oh, I've got to ride the ridge. I didn't plan on this, but here I am. Now what do I do? Because you're already up in the thick of it, right? Say a situation has shown up in your life that is requiring you to think differently, and there's a higher level of risk, and you're very committed, like you're in it. The only way to kind of get through that moment is to get through it successfully and safely, right? So for the people that choose to take the risk, growing business, maybe asking for a promotion, maybe coming up with an innovative idea to do at work that's never been heard of before, you're putting yourself out of a comfort zone. And you can practice along the way, but it's worth it if you can discipline your thinking so that to get to the positive outcome, you have to focus, you have to pick the line you want to ride. That's motorcycle language, right? So pick the line you want to ride. You have to look ahead. You can't look at the bike. You can't look down. You don't want to look at the tire. You actually have to look at the track many feet out in front of you so you can quickly determine where you want to place that tire. And when you're up with the risk that high, you're not going to make a lot of movements, okay? It's very, very controlled. You have to control your activities to be safe. You want to keep the momentum going. And so when risk is high, whether it's you choose to do something like that or you end up unexpected, you're up riding a ridgeline on a hill that you didn't expect, right? A set of circumstances that you didn't expect. And at first it seems like it's a little overwhelming. It's a little over your abilities. You don't know how you're going to pull it off. Your heart's just pump, 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 right? The adrenaline's kicking in. Here are a couple of things that are part of this concept of riding the ridgeline that can help get you through that situation safely and feel really good about it on the end. And some of this, a little bit of this is going to sound counterintuitive, okay? So part one, when you're riding a ridgeline, so I gave you this whole big analogy so you can pick what's the situation in your life that might be putting you to test. It might be tasking you above what you think you're capable of or you felt like you're capable of, or it's something that you want to do that you know is going to stretch you, right? So number one, remember, pick the line you want. You have to stay your focus. So this is what I'm talking about. You have to sometimes dig in and lean in with what's called a narrow focus. Now, this concept of a narrow focus, hey Anthony, a narrow focus versus a full focus. This is something that I learned from my doctors when I was working my brain. My eyes and my brain had to learn to work together again. And there was a point where my peripheral vision, it wasn't functioning. So I actually had to learn how to teach my brain again to see in full periphery. Most people take that for granted. But there's a skill you can develop, and I've talked about this before, it's fuller focused, right? When you are riding the ridgeline, you're going through something really intense where there's a high risk to you but a high reward for you. It's very important that you're able to manage the distraction and stay fully focused and in the zone. So that's number one, because managing the distractions, if you focus on the distraction, a distraction is not what you want. And your brain, there's conscious thought and subconscious. Your brain will do and manifest, bring about what you think on most. So if you're riding the ridgeline, right, whether you're hiking it and there's 10,000 foot drop and you got a narrow ridge on a camber, which is something that I did in January. I went out and I was up, we were up hiking. It was a great hike, but there was a point where we had to hike a ridgeline. And then we came down and we're on the backside of this hill. And I remember at one point, I have an average woman size foot. The ridge was on a camber like this. It was on an angle like this. There was a wall right here and I had to face the wall and walk sideways and my feet were hanging off the ridge. And there was a steep drop down below. So I needed to not look at the wall. I had to focus on the line I was hiking and not worry about the drop off below me, right? So So focus on what you want, not what you're trying to avoid. Okay, so when you're riding the ridge, focus on what you want, pick your line. You're looking for stability. Where do you place your feet? Where do you put the tire? What's the next step, the next action you should do in achieving your goal? And then number 2, practice the art of going slow. This is huge, and I talk about this. In fact, I wrote one of the books I wrote a book in June. It's kind of cool. I wrote it on Sunday. I edited the book on Monday, and I launched it on Tuesday because I was that into the content. So this book is called My Quick Start Guide to Trailblazing. It's your Trailblazing hand guide. It's your quick start guide to pivot into profits. And what this is, it's 7 principles that I've learned from rehabilitating and having to learn to walk again, talk again, get all my body parts functioning the way they're supposed to again. I went through this crazy brain rehabilitation while raising my kids, having a family, overhauling 2 businesses, starting a new special project, and trust me, it was a lot to do, and I'm glad I did it. But what I'm able to share with you are principles that helped me get through that, because I will tell you, friend, it was not easy. So this element of the art of going slow. You can tell I talk fast. I talk fast, think fast, move fast, I get things done, right? We are living in a world that has a lot of momentum, and there's a lot of growth, a lot of change happening rapidly, and it can create for you a sensation of overwhelm. And some of a huge success tip, and it's counterintuitive to what most people do, is when you intentionally slow down. When other people urge you sometimes to push ahead, sometimes the right decision is to slow down. Now, in motorcycle riding, when you're riding on soft sand, on lower level ground, right? When you're riding on soft sand, you actually have to go faster. You don't want to slow down when you're riding in soft sand because you will crash. The bike will just jackknife and you'll crash. So you have to go faster on sand. But when you're on the ridge line, you're up high and you've got a narrow path, the risk of whatever you're going to do is a little bigger. Take the time to slow down just a little bit. In fact, in the world of motorcycles and competitive motorcycles, there are motorcycle shops. So I'm talking, they could be selling street bikes, it could be selling dirt bikes. You've probably seen motorcycle guys where they're riding in a really short parking lot, and some of them, they go fast, and then all of a sudden they pick the bike up they do kind of a reverse wheelie, so they're not kicking the front end up, but they're going up, the back end comes up, and they hold that bike. That's a skill. That takes skill to understand how to move that bike in a closed, tight space. But there's actually another type of contest that goes on, and there are these motorcycle shops that test skill, and it's the slow race. And this is so cool, right? It's not who's going to cross the finish line fastest. It's who has the most skill to control the vehicle that they're on, the motorcycle, or in this case, it could be your business, your profession, or whatever you're doing personally. So the slow race for motorcycles is, the contest is who can cross the finish line fast. However, you have to stay upright and no cheating. You can't put your feet on the ground. So it's balancing and maneuvering super, super slow. When you're riding a ridge line, you're going through something kind of dangerous or risk. You know, it's a risk somehow. It could be a risk to your reputation. It could be just a risk to your ego, right? It could be a risk to, there could be financial risk involved, whatever the risk is, right? Maybe you're risking your heart because it's a relationship. You have to have a comfortable, maybe you have to have I call it a difficult, sensitive conversation with somebody, right? You have to have that tough talk. When you need more wisdom and the risk is higher, slow down. Because clarity will come when you slow down. When you're riding up high on those ridges, it's not about who crosses the finish line fast. It's about who crosses the finish line. And sometimes it takes better planning, assessing the terrain, like what I talked about this morning, assessing the terrain so you can pick your line, or if you're hiking, you can place your feet in the next place that's really, really safe. So understand the art of going slow. If you actually, let me give a little, I have a little goodie for you if you'd like. The book I wrote, I'm actually giving away for free right now. It is an ebook. You can go to trailblazingtips.com, trailblazingtips.com. Just put your information in the form and you click submit and it'll send the book to you. So then the third part, so there's one part more that I want to wrap up because this is really powerful. So when you're riding the ridgeline, right, you're going for it, and whatever it is, there is this element to every single human being, and it's called our ego. And I mentioned it just a second ago, but there's something else for you to understand and consider. I'm going to kind of pause and I'm going to go on my soapbox. This is my opinion. I personally feel very deeply that a lot of the things that we are seeing on Facebook, we're experiencing in our own life and with our own friends. There's a lot of people whose inner heart is a little scared. It's unsettled. There's a lot of trauma that is being stirred up around us, and it has an impact on our ego. Now, I'm not going to go deep in this, but one of the books that I wrote, I'm trying to think, when did I write it? I don't remember this one, when I wrote it. I published this one in 2009. This is a book called Repairing the Reprobate Mind. This was never a book I ever thought about writing. It started out as a just an article, and then it got a lot of traction. I turned it into an ebook, and then I turned it into a workbook. So this is not so much about business. This is all about us and our mindset. I was very motivated and inspired to write this book because there's a lot of teaching that I see around this subject matter that from my studies, biblical studies, that are incorrect. So I wrote something that I feel, I know it's helped a lot of people, but my point is, why am I talking about this in ego? So in writing that book, there was hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of research. Trust me, that was not a one-day write. That was years. But when you're riding the ridgeline, right, and we're living our life right now, and there's this, I keep talking about it, this disconnect with people. There's the who you are, the who you want to be, and my heart is to help kind of zipper it up. Let's fix the hole in your heart. When you're doing things that are a little out of your comfort zone, right? You're stepping into something greater. You're stepping into the fullness of you. There's a risk to your ego at a certain level. Will people like it? How will this be received? How's my message going to be heard? Am I going to be made fun of? And there's a difference between ego and arrogance. Now notice I'm not talking arrogance, I'm talking ego. And so arrogance is a mask over our ego. Our ego is tied to our self-identity. And more often when we think about someone who's egotistical, they're very self-centered, they're big, they're bold, they're brash. But there's this mirror side to ego. And I learned a lot about this when I was writing this book. There's this mirror side to ego, and it's actually the still, quiet voice that is more of concern when we're talking about ego. And it can cause unintentional hurt and hardship. And I personally feel, this is my opinion, I personally feel that a lot of the hurts and a lot of the hardship that people are dealing with, they're struggling with right now, is because their heart is hurting. There's a hole in their heart that they don't know how to fill. In their ego, there's elements about that still, quiet voice of ego that needs nurturing. It needs some support. And I'm not here to go deep into that subject today, but I just am sharing this with you because you may have never thought about the mirror side of ego. And sometimes it's our little mirror side of ego, that quiet ego, can hold us back from taking that next step, okay? When you implement, or you could get that bold, brash, yeah, I'm bold, I can do it, right? So think about the adrenaline that comes when you're riding a motorcycle or doing something really intense and you're going for it. And, you know, motorcycles, a lot of people think you're going to go fast. Runners, you want to go fast. And So when you implement this art of slow, what can prevent when you manage the ego about not needing to cross the finish line in something first, that's where success comes in. When the ego plays and it's like, no, 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 I have to be first, that's where there's this narrow scope of ego and arrogance. Arrogance can overcome the ego, but that ego of I've got it, I can just fly right through this and I'm not going to get hurt at all, that's the ego that can cause detriment. So I'm just sharing with you right now this concept of riding the ridgeline, because you're probably going through something, or you know a person in your life that is going through something that is putting them out of their comfort zone. They could be on the ridge. It could be financial, it could be business. I mean, who knows what it is, right? And they need a little bit of love and support. It could be you, but I'm hoping that my sharing like these 3 principles, focus, be very focused on the outcome that you want and not the distraction, okay? Be focused on the outcome you want and stay steadfast with it. Pay attention of when to slow down so you can choose your line carefully, and then watch your ego. Watch the ego. Is the ego flaring up in a big way? Or is it also coming up in a way that maybe it's a little too sensitive and it doesn't believe in you enough? Those are things that can cause some slip-ups. And so these are all avoidable. There are ways to help build our confidence, especially when we've had a lot of hurt. Lord knows I've been through a lot of it, and I won't go into all of that right now. But I do want to share one more thing, okay? Because if you're the one that's going through, you're riding the ridge, right? You've got something really cool, something risky, something out of the comfort zone. First of all, I'd love to know what it is. How can I help you? You know, it's awesome. A part of who I am is I want to encourage you to go for it. Because you know what? You have big dreams. You have dreams that you deserve to live. Even if there was something that you had as a kid, go for it now as an adult. It's really freaking cool, right? To just do that. But let's say you get yourself in a situation and you're in one of those where, especially if you're going up a hill and it's a real quick, fast up a hill and you're not riding the ridge, it's like an up down. Even when you get to the end of a ridge, usually, hopefully, you can pause, you can control your, what's the word? Sorry, I'm having one of those days, right? You can control your speed. So that's, it's like a controlled stop, right? You get to, you know that you're going down, so you got to control your speed before you go over the hill. And hopefully you can assess and choose your line. And the key here is sometimes when you're in a risky thing that's a little out of your comfort zone, do your best. And if you go down, right, I'm going to use a motorcycle analogy again, just for a second. Let's say you trip and fall, or the bike goes down, right? Because sometimes it just happens. That's where you want to learn to control the fall. You learn how to fall. You actually learn and you practice how to fall so you can get out from under the bike so it doesn't hurt you. So don't avert yourself from risk, but it's really about gaining the skill set. And sometimes you need to practice your way in. So remember those the whoops, practice your way with a mentor. Find a mentor who's been where you've been before and follow their path. Let them help you through your situation. So with that, I went a little bit long today, but I hope that you found that this was of value. And my heart here is to give you some new perspective. Trailblazing TV is, I'm trailblazing some new perspectives to help you in your life, personally, professionally. And I'd love to hear what you're up to. You know, let me know what I can teach you. What do you want to know about? How can I help you? But with this, my friend, thanks for being with me this afternoon. Remember, live in your power, live in your peace. Know that I love you, and have a really blessed day. All right, thanks. Bye.